Hello there, FFTCG community. I'm Judge Jared, and you are watching episode 16 of Rules Roundup, where I go over rules questions that were asked in the unofficial global Discord server this week, and go over the answers to them and the rules behind them as a way for you to both test your own rules knowledge, and then hopefully come away from the episode learning at least a little something that you didn't know before. Now, this week, it's been a week. It's been quite a week in the world of FFTCG. And even if we just stick to official announcements, we started off the week with the full set being spoiled, the rest of the set of Opus 26. People were still digesting all that and working on building new decks with the cards and testing things out online when the ban lists and restricted lists got a very unexpected and mildly seismic update. So that just kind of dropped another bomb on us all in the same day. And then 2 days later, we got the announcement of what the format is going to be for both the North American and European championships. And that announcement definitely did not make anybody upset. So here we are after all that. And we're going into the weekend. It's Friday. It's not actually Friday. It's Thursday when I'm recording. But it's going to be Friday when you're watching this, at least. Maybe it's a Thursday again. Maybe you're watching this on a Thursday afterward. I don't know. Why did I go off on this little sidetrack? I don't know. Just because stream of consciousness. But anyway, going into the weekend. Going into the weekend after all this up and down. So however you feel about all the announcements this week, Rules Roundup is here for you. I'm here for you. We're going to get through this together. And just like the mail, the rules questions do not stop. So why don't we get to them, right? Let's start off with a nice little short one. How does this function as an X burst? We're taking it back for question number 1. This is Mateus from Opus 2, a card that I haven't seen hit any zone on anybody's playmat in quite a while. But let's talk about it. So the text on this is just about as short as the question is. The effect on Mateus says, opponent puts 1 attacking forward into the break zone. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Okay, sure. Opponent had a forward that was attacking, and now they have to just put it into the break zone. Because it does say puts 1 attacking forward in the break zone, if there's a party attack, they can decide which one of the attacking, you have multiple attacking forwards at that point in time, they could decide which one is going to be put in the break zone. But this has an X burst on it. So the question here is what happens when this comes up as an X burst? It's got to be functional in some way or they wouldn't have put X burst on it. But the natural question that comes up is that if you're taking this as an X burst, you probably just received a point of damage from an attack. It's possible that you dealt yourself a point of damage and you flip this up and then you're just crying a little bit because there's nothing attacking you other than yourself. But there's no forwards attacking you, just your own self attacking you for whatever that's worth. So chances are you just took a point of damage from being attacked, but it's like, well, hold on, I just took the damage, so there aren't any attacking forwards, right? Like they're done attacking. They did their thing. They went up, they went poke, and I took the damage, and we're done, right? But as you might be able to guess from the context of the fact that this is an X burst, that's actually not the case. Interesting little factoid about how kind of attacking works and the way that the game tracks attacking and blocking forwards and all that is that when damage resolution happens, you have the damage resolution step where you do, in this case, if it was an unblocked forward or party, you do receive the damage. And then there's a priority that happens right after that. And during that priority that happens after damage resolution, any forwards that were attacking are still considered attacking forwards. Not the most intuitive thing. Seems like they're done, but they're still, they're still amped up after dealing damage to something. So they're still attacking in game terms, and that's what we need to know here. So because of that, this X burst, even though it doesn't use the stack, the important thing is that this is after damage resolution happens, right? So we've already dealt the point of damage. So there is this window that includes the priority afterward, in which those forwards are still considered attacking forwards, and that's how this card functions. Since the question was, how does this function as an X burst? How it functions is that whatever just attacked you, or was attacking you, you can still use this effect, and then your opponent has to put one of those attacking forwards, or if it was the only one, the attacking forward into the break zone. So yeah, really all you need to understand for this one is the fact that forwards are still considered attacking all the way through the priority that happens after damage resolution, and basically they only stop being attacking forwards once you've returned back to the attack declaration step. Next up, we have a question about Fang, one of our new cards that was spoiled earlier this week when we got the full set. The question here is, for this Fang, if I am able to trigger her twice in a turn through bounce or blink, etc., would that make my next l'Cie cost 2 less? She's a new card, so let's talk about what they're asking about here, which is the auto ability at the top of Fang's game text here, which says, when Fang enters the field, you may search for one job l'Cie and add it to your hand. During this turn, the cost required to cast your next job l'Cie is reduced by 1. So in short, she enters the field, you search for a l'Cie, and then as part of the effect, it says, hey, this turn, the next time you play a l'Cie, reduce the cost by 1. The person asking the question here, they want to know if we can stack this effect twice. If we somehow play Fang, and then she leaves for whatever reason, and then she enters again, but can we combine those two? And the answer is provisionally yes. And I say provisionally because it depends on how she comes back the second time. What I mean by that is if it's what people call a blink effect, something like Renoa, where it's an effect that in that case would remove Fang, send her to the remove from play zone, and then return her to the field, then the answer is yes. The reason why is because after her auto ability resolves, you have this ongoing effect that says, hey, the next time that you play a l'Cie, it's reduced by 1. She leaves the field, she comes back, her auto ability triggers again, and then it resolves again, and so now you have 2 of these floating out there that said, hey, the next time that you play a l'Cie, job l'Cie, reduce it by 1, and those get added together. Even it's two of the same effect, but they are cumulative. So if that's the way you're doing it, then yes, you can combine them. The reason I say provisionally is because since the other example given here is through bounce, you have to keep in mind that it depends how you're getting Fang back into play. Because if you return Fang to your hand and then you just cast Fang again, well, here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that she's job l'Cie. So when you cast her the second time, it's going to reduce her cost by 1. And now you've just used the effect that you had before. So you're not going to be able to combine them because you just used it. Similarly, if you returned her to your hand, or if she just went somewhere, just left the field for whatever reason, and then you play like the Wind Hope, that can search for pay X, search your deck, and play a l'Cie onto the field, then the thing there is that if you cast Hope, well, okay, now you just used up your reduction on Hope, right? I'm fairly certain he's job l'Cie. I don't have it in front of me. But yeah, so you use it up there. So provisionally, just because you have to make sure you're careful in how you're going about Fang leaving the field and coming back. But as long as you do that without casting another l'Cie along the way, yeah, absolutely. You can like stack both of these and make the next l'Cie that you play be reduced by 2. It doesn't even have the little thing on there that says that it can't become 0. So if you're trying to play like the Earth Lightning Vanille, then you can just plop her down for free. Don't have to pay anything, so that's cool. All right, next up, not a new card. It says, if Clive gets Amaterasu'd, does the opponent still discard as a cost? Clive, best known for entering the field and then immediately priming into Ifrit. Well, guess what? He has more game text than priming. Believe it or not, there's actually more game text to him than just that priming line, and that includes this auto ability at the bottom of his text that says, when Clive deals damage to your opponent, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. That's what we're talking about here with this question, and the person is asking what happens if that auto ability gets targeted by Amaterasu, which of course Amaterasu cancels auto abilities. It doesn't even have to specifically even be Amaterasu we're talking about. It could be any effect that says it cancels an auto ability. What's going to happen here if Clive's auto ability is getting canceled? The first thing I have to point out here is terminology is important. And the thing about talking about the rules is that it can come across as being like a lot of semantics and being, very kind of nitpicky with wording. But the thing about the rules is we have to be nitpicky about wording because the certain words carry certain rules and certain things behind them, and so we have to make sure that we're careful in our terminology. And so I try to make sure that I'm always using the correct terminology and pointing out when we need to adjust certain things. And what I'm going to talk about here with regards to that is the question says, does the opponent still discard as a cost? And I get why they're calling this a cost, right? The auto ability says, if there's the trigger event, but then the effect just says discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. So from a strategic standpoint, discarding your hand, it feels like a cost, right? Whenever we have an effect that does something that we would prefer usually not to do, or that we see as a drawback of some kind, whether it's discarding your hand or whether it's taking a point of damage, it feels like a cost, right? And I get that mentality. What we have to separate out here is that in rules terms, it is not a cost. It is absolutely not a cost. It's just part of the effect, right? So effects are kind of neither inherently good or bad. They just are, right? And so why we play cards is because we want the effects that happen. But the parts of them that are in there are not necessarily negative or positive. It's just the effect of what happens. So it's not a cost because in this game, for something to be a cost, it needs to either be the CP costs of the crystal there, or it needs to specify in the effect that it is an additional or alternate cost. They will use the word cost in the effect, or they need to use the word pay in there. So if you have something that says, if it's an auto ability, it says like, when trigger event, you may pay XYZ. Okay, that's a cost, right? Those things are costs. If it's not one of those, it is not a cost. And this is important because, again, the word cost has rules associated with it. You can't pay costs with cards that you don't control or own, depending on what type of cost we're talking about, or resources that are yours, things like that. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that the discarding of the hand here is not a cost. Okay, now that being said, since I mentioned that it's part of the effect, the thing about Amaterasu and cards like that is that their wording says cancel the effect. Now, if we're canceling the effect, we're canceling the entire effect, which means that if Clive gets hit with an Amaterasu, or rather if his auto ability gets hit with an Amaterasu, it's going to cancel all of it, right? It's not going to like wait until the opponent discards their hand and then cancel, which if you're the Amaterasu player, you would just be like dancing about that, unless they had no hand anyway, I guess. But it's not going to cancel that, or it's not going to have them do the discard and then just cancel the drawing. It's going to cancel the entire thing. The other reason why this could be confusing is because there are a lot of effects that will have like whatever they do, and then it says when you do so, and then it creates a new auto ability. And this is not one of those. We don't have a when you do so in here. This is all one effect. So you just one thing after the other. You discard your hand, then you draw 2 cards. So yeah, if you're canceling Clive or his auto ability with any effect, it's going to cancel the discarding the hand too. So just keep that in mind strategically when you're playing. All right, next up, we're back to a couple of new cards. You'll see that theme this week because there were a lot of new cards spoiled, and so there's a lot of questions about them. Here we have, do you still take the damage if the opponent is choosing their own card from this effect? We have Thaliak, who's one of the 12, which are all over this set because, spoiler alert, there's 12 of them. And then we have the new Ifrit, who was spoiled a little while back, but let's talk about what these abilities are and how they interact or don't with each other. So Thaliak's ability says, when Thaliak enters the field, if you control 4 or more job the 12, your opponent selects one forward they control, put it into the break zone, draw 1 card. So it enters, we're going to assume that there's at least 4 of the 12 out there. Opponent selects a forward they control, put it in the break zone, draw a card. Ifrit has an auto ability. It says, when Ifrit 16 is blocked or chosen by your opponent's ability, Ifrit 16 deals damage, Ifrit 16 deals your opponent 1 point of damage. So when Ifrit's chosen by opponent's ability, auto ability triggers, and when it resolves, deals the opponent 1 point of damage. So the question here is, Thaliak's effect, is that going to cause Ifrit's ability to trigger the auto ability there? And in their wording, they say if the opponent is choosing their own card from this effect. And going back to what I was just talking about the previous question, word choice matters. Word choice is incredibly important here. And if we parse all the words in Thaliak's ability, it says your opponent selects one forward they control. If you've been watching these videos long enough, you've probably heard me say this, but I'm going to say it again here. Golden rule with this: if an effect doesn't say choose, it is not choosing. If the effect doesn't say choose, it is not choosing. Nowhere in Thaliak's auto ability there does it use the word choose, and Ifrit's auto ability specifically says that the trigger event is when Ifrit is chosen by your opponent's ability. So, since Thaliak doesn't say choose, it's not choosing, it's not going to trigger Ifrit there. And so that's, of course, a design choice and kind of a balanced choice. There's pluses and minuses to having your opponent select something versus choosing it yourself. But in this case, it's going to get around Ifrit's auto ability because there's no choosing happening. So, yeah, if Ifrit gets selected, then not going to trigger. So the Ifrit player needs to hope they have something like a Leo that they'd rather get rid of, I guess. All right, next up, back to old cards. Does Sahagin Chief see the other water monster enter and gain a counter? Now, Sahagin Chief has a whole lot of text, but all we have to worry about for this question is the first line, which says, when a water character other than Sahagin Chief enters your field, put 1 monster counter on Sahagin Chief. All right, pretty straightforward. Whenever Sahagin Chief's out and another water character gets played, then add a monster counter. Now, Relm, also one of those cards that if you've been playing for longer than 5 minutes, you know what Relm does. But I don't think I've really had a chance to talk about her much in any of these videos. So let's just go over what she does for the sake of clarity. She has this auto ability. It says, when Relm enters the field, you may search for up to 1 monster of cost 1 and up to 1 monster of cost 2 and play them onto the field. And the other ability doesn't matter for this question. So when she enters, you get to search for 2 different monsters, 1 of cost 1, 1 of cost 2, and play them onto the field. And this is one of those things where there's a lot of effects and sequences in FFTCG where things do not happen simultaneously. It's all part of one effect, or a lot of things happen, but they're not actually simultaneous. But there are some that are simultaneous, and this is one of them. So when you're resolving Relm's search, in this case, they're getting the Sahagin Chief, and they're getting another 1 cost monster, which, for the purpose of this question, needs to be a water monster. Otherwise, it wouldn't trigger Sahagin Chief anyway. So let's say an Apkalu, because that also just is happening a lot right now with Relm. So the Sahagin Chief and the Apkalu, when we were resolving Relm's effect, they both enter the field. And the question here is, basically, does the Sahagin Chief trigger off of the Apkalu entering? They're entering simultaneously. So are they seeing each other enter, essentially, is the question here. And the answer to that is yes. Anything that's entering simultaneously, or even just changing zones simultaneously, is seeing everything else that's going at the same time if it is actually simultaneous. In the same way that if you have multiple forwards or characters going into the break zone at the same time, they do see each other going into the break zone at the same time. And in this case, they're entering the field, but it's the same concept. It's simultaneous, they're seeing each other. And we know that this is the case because this question's been asked in the past, specifically regarding Opus 1 Golbez, who has that effect that when he goes into the break zone from the field, you search your deck for up to 4 cost 2 forwards of different elements, play them onto the field. It's been asked in that scenario if auto abilities that trigger from other forwards entering will trigger when the 4 forwards in that case are entering at the same time, and they have said yes. So we know that the timing on this works out to where they're going to see each other. So yes, Sahagin Chief will see the Apkalu or whatever other cost 1 water monster is entering, and we'll get that counter when it enters the field. Next up, we've got, can I Leviathan to target Rosa's auto ability? Because if I'm correct in my logic, you can use Ama on her because Amaterasu doesn't target. But with the way the Leviathan is worded, is Rosa safe? Been a big week for Rosa this week. Not this one, but I don't know. Maybe we'll start seeing her more this particular iteration of her. Leviathan is another one of these summons that can cancel an auto ability, like Amaterasu, which is why it's part of the question here. So let's go over what Leviathan does and how, maybe kind of understand how it's different and how it's the same compared to Amaterasu. It has an optional extra cost, which ties in back to the conversation a couple questions ago about costs. So it says if you cast Leviathan, you can remove 10 water cards in your break zone from the game as an extra cost. So that's just kind of thrown in there, and then it comes in later, whether or not you did that. It says choose one auto ability triggered from a forward. Cancel its effect. If you paid the extra cost and that forward is on the field, return that forward to its owner's hand. So I assume for this question, they're asking regarding if that extra cost was paid, because if the extra cost is not paid, then then Leviathan, all it does is just cancel the auto ability, which doesn't do anything to Rosa directly. But if the extra cost is paid, I almost said post is paid. If the extra cost is paid, then it would return it to its owner's hand. And so they're wondering if what that will do to Rosa. And the reason why, now Rosa does have two auto abilities that have to do with when you cast a certain number of cards per turn, and that's where you would be casting Leviathan, right? One of those auto abilities triggered from Rosa, and then in response to that, we're casting Leviathan and trying to cancel that auto. But she also has an action ability at the bottom that is cost 1 wind, and it says Rosa gains. Rosa cannot be chosen by her opponent's abilities until the end of the turn. So this gets used a lot whenever somebody's trying to do something to remove Rosa. If they played a cloud or something from LB, you could just, generate 1 wind, and then she gains this, can't be chosen by abilities till the end of the turn, and it's a feels bad for your opponent. The easy answer to this question is no, she's not protected. And why is that the easy answer? Because her ability, if you've been paying attention so far, her ability protects her against abilities. She gains Rosa cannot be chosen by her opponent's abilities till the end of the turn, and Leviathan is a summon. So whether or not you used this ability that she has, she's not protected from Leviathan just by the virtue of the fact that it's a summon. So there's that. But I assume that's just something that the person asking the question kind of didn't think of. They kind of missed here. So for the sake of answering the question, kind of and what the intent of the question is, let's say that it did protect against summons, just for the sake of argument and for answering the question here. If it did protect against summons, then the way this would play out is that they would use that ability, it would resolve, and then we would get to resolving Leviathan. And this is going to be kind of the cousin of my golden rule of if it doesn't say choose, it doesn't choose. The thing here with Leviathan is it does say choose, but it chooses an auto ability that's triggered from a forward. It doesn't choose the forward, but the rest of its text here with the extra cost being paid where it says return that forward to its owner's hand, the thing is none of that effect says choose a forward, right? It references the forward, but it references it in this roundabout way where it's referencing it based off of the auto ability that you chose. It's not actually choosing Rosa. It's sneaky like that. It's cool, but it's sneaky that it's affecting her, but not choosing her. So even if her ability that protects herself protected from summons and abilities, not just abilities, then it still would not stop Leviathan from returning her to her hand because she's not being chosen. Her auto ability is, but she's not being chosen by it. So yeah, the short version is her ability doesn't protect against summons anyway. The long version is that any level of protection from summons is not going to help here because Leviathan is not actually choosing her. Next up, we have a question about another recent card. It was actually, I think, the last card of the week that we had, which is Rala. I don't know the pronunciation of this. I meant to learn it before I did this video, and I don't I forgot to. So I don't know if it's Rala or Rala. All I know is that whenever I see its name, I have this uncontrollable, I hear it as if it's being sung by Lady Gaga. So that's been my little mind goblin, and now it's potentially your little mind goblin, that every time I see its name, just, Rala, Rala. So I don't know. It's got theme music, I guess. So the question is, for the new Rala, how would we sequence the field ability? If opponent declares attack, do I declare no blocks, then say field ability will activate after/during damage resolution to then dull Rala and take 0 damage? This is a great question because it actually has nothing to do with any interactions with any other cards. This is just getting into that Rala has like a pretty interesting and somewhat unique effect, and it's just, how does this even work, right? How do is what it comes down to. So the way it's worded, it says, if you receive damage while Rala is active, dull Rala. The damage becomes 0 instead. Credit to the person who asked this, because they did call out specifically that this ability is a field ability. And so they know that, but I'm going to point this out just for anybody who didn't catch that, because the way it's worded and the way that the effect works, you would be forgiven for thinking that it's an auto ability, because this ability is just kind of sitting there until a certain action happens. I don't want to call it a trigger because this is not an auto ability, but until a certain something happens, an event happens, let's say. And then when that event happens, it makes a certain action happen on Rala, which does multiple things, right? So from the outside, it sure looks like an auto ability, right? It looks like, oh, trigger event, effect. But it's not. And the way we know it's not an auto ability is because it doesn't use the words when, whenever, or at the in it. That's an important distinction. If it's an auto ability, it's going to be somewhere in it, usually at the beginning, but somewhere in it, it's going to say when, whenever, or at the. This one doesn't use any of those. So it is a field ability. So yeah, points to the person who asked the question for knowing it's a field ability. So they're asking just basically, when I'm using this card, how do I work this in terms of it being clear to my opponent and making sure that everything's done properly? And that's a good question, because the way this works functionally is just that you're going to receive a damage, and then because Rala is active, instead of taking the damage, we have this replacement effect. But kind of there's a little sequence that leads to the replacement effect, which is that it was active, now it's going to become dull, and then the rest of that says now it gets replaced with the damage becoming 0 instead. So I think if I was using this card, I would just make sure that I'm very clear to my opponent how we're kind of going through the steps of the attack phase, because normally if a attacker doesn't get blocked, the person will declare like no block, and then they kind of motion towards or start to make clear that they're about to take the damage, unless the opponent has something they're going to do in the priority that's between block declaration and damage resolution. And most of the time that's all we have to do, right? If there's no interruption, okay, cool, I'm taking the damage. But now there's that potential confusion of that if they don't remember that Rala is going to prevent the damage, then, do you just say, okay, well, it's been prevented? And then they go, oh, wait, I want to do something in the priority there. Or they think they're going to deal you the damage, and then you go, okay, I'm going to take the damage. Oh, wait, nope, there's no damage, right? And then if you start to motion towards your deck to kind of make it seem like you're about to take the damage, like we're getting to damage resolution, then oh, you kind of pulled a fast one because you're not actually taking damage, but you were kind of motioning like you were going to. I could see it getting murky depending on how people are handling it. So what I would do is I would just make very clear, that we're going to damage resolution. I wouldn't use the word activate, which they said, do you declare no blocks and then say field ability will activate? It's not activate because it's, again, loaded words here. We're not activating any abilities. Like you usually associate that with action abilities and special abilities and stuff, that word. So if I wasn't going to block and they had an attacker, then I would say no block, and then I would probably ask them move the damage resolution, in the same way that you would say like move to the attack phase, where you don't just do it, you kind of make clear that both players are like, okay, we're good on this, like we both pass priority and go to it. And then, so if you say move the damage resolution, if they say yes, okay, then now they've confirmed moving to damage resolution, and now we'll do the sequence of things. And if they forgot about it, well, at least we made clear that we were going to damage resolution, right? And that's just their fault for forgetting that it was going to get kind of, sidestepped by Rala. But that's the way I would do it to make sure that there's no miscommunication about it. Yeah, so just being clear that I'm not declaring a blocker, but then also being clear that, okay, move to the damage resolution, and then kind of resolve things from there. So that's my personal suggestion on it. All right, do you like questions about Rala? Do you want another one? Here it is, another question about Rala. Rala with new lightning. Do I take 0 damage? This lightning has been an endless source of questions ever since she was spoiled. But this question actually has nothing to do with the really confusing part of her. This has to do with the field ability. That's her second ability, which says, if lightning forming a party deals damage to your opponent, the damage becomes 2 instead. This is another one where it's a totally valid question, which is we just went over what Rala does in the previous question. But if we're dealing 2 damage with lightning's effect, then it becomes a question of, does that count as, is that 2 separate instances of damage, or is it 1 instance of 2 damage? And this has come up with a lot of cards before, right? Ones that have the ability to do more than 1 damage as part of dealing damage, right? And so the way to think of it, the way I keep describing it to people, is to just think of it the same way as the fact that we have forwards of so many different power levels, right? You could be 1,000 power, you could be 20,000 power, anywhere in between or even higher. And it doesn't matter whether you're dealing 1,000 damage or whether you're dealing 5,000 damage or 13,000 damage. It's all 1 instance of damage that has a different variable attached to it, right? So it's 1 instance of damage that we just, have that, how much was it? And it's the same thing with player damage. It's not as obvious with player damage because we are flipping over cards separately for each one, but in game terms, it's the same concept. It's the idea that, okay, she dealt damage, but there's a variable amount of damage that could have been being dealt. And in this case, it's 2 instead of 1. So it's 1 instance of damage, but it's dealing 2 damage. So what that means is that if Rala is active and Rala's field ability ends up, I'm trying to use the right wording, if the replacement effect from Rala's field ability happens when lightning deals the damage in a party, it's going to take that damage and probably make it go from 2 to 0. I say probably because technically the person receiving the damage, which would be the Rala player, if there's multiple replacement effects, they get to decide the order with which to apply the replacement effects. So in this case, we have Lightning, who her replacement makes it 2 instead, and we have Rala, whose replacement makes it 0 instead. So most of the time, strategically, they would go, oh, okay, we're going to make it 2 instead, and then make it 0 instead, so that the end result is 0 now. But if for some odd reason they wanted to, they could apply it the other way around, and they could go, okay, Rala's going to do its thing, and it makes it 0 instead, and then Lightning makes it 2 instead. So you could apply it that way, and that would be interesting strategically, but you could. So, yeah, that's not really what they're asking here, I'm sure. They just want to know, is it going to be 2 or not? Because they're saying, yeah, do I take 0 damage? So, yeah, the answer is that Rala will turn the entire instance of damage into that. Which means if you control Rala and you cast the old Opus XXVI Dark Zodiark and break a whole bunch of stuff and take like 9 damage, that 9 damage gets turned into 0 damage thanks to Rala. It's the old, if you've been around long enough, you saw the memes of Zodiark plus the Earth Gabranth. I guess you could do the same thing with Montleonis, but with Earth Gabranth, like on demand, can break himself and make it your next damage 0. So It's a concept that's been around for a while, but it's just popping back up because of the weirdness of Rala and lightning doing what she does. Now, this is a question about lightning. And because it's a question about this lightning, you know what I have to do. You know what time it is. Do you know what time it is? Maybe? It's shameless plug time. Yeah, that's right. It's shameless plug time because I did a video all about that lightning. Literally nothing but questions about that lightning, explaining how that lightning works. That video is called Let's Talk About Lightning. And yeah, so I talked about her and all the weirdness of her other ability, because that's mostly where things came up. I just focused on stuff that was new concepts, rules wise in there. I didn't really touch on the things that already exist, like this thing with the damage. But if you have questions about how she works, you should go check out that video, either before or after you finish this one, and go get a whole bunch of your questions about lightning answered. So yeah, I feel duty bound, honor bound, to do the shameless plug if I answer a question about lightning. So there it is, shameless plug. On to the next question though. Next up, we've got another new card here, Sid WOFF, and then Lunafreya. Not a new card, but a card that sees a whole lot of play. The question is, if my opponent has Sid WOFF on their field, and I cast Lunafreya LB from my LB deck, when Lunafreya hits an X burst card, say Thordan X, while I have no cards in my hand, I use the X to search a card. Does the Sid discard that card or not? Can you explain how the stack is built? I love this question. I love this question because it's always a good opportunity just to explain the process of Lunafreya, because it's one of those things where like we know what she does, but you have to, if you really get into the nitty gritty of the steps of it, people may be a little bit wonkier on that. And then we just get to describe how that interacts with something like Sid here. So Sid, thankfully, has very little text to it. Sid's effect here says that when your opponent uses an X burst, your opponent randomly discards one card. That's all there is to it. It's an auto ability. Your opponent uses an X burst, they have to randomly discard one. It's like the anti-Lena, right? Instead of you drawing a card, they have to randomly discard one. And in this question, the person asking it is wondering how that's going to interact with if they were going to search something off of Thordan. So before I get into that, let's talk about that process with Lunafreya here. So Lunafreya's effect says, when Lunafreya enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. Add one card among them to your hand and return the other cards to the bottom of your deck in any order. And then it goes on to say, if the card added to your hand has an X burst, you may trigger its X burst effects. This effect is placed on the stack. So set Sid aside for a second here. Let's go through the process of Lunafreya, especially if it's Lunafreya hitting a Thordan, just for the sake of this question. So we go to resolve Lunafreya's effect. She flips over 5 cards, and then one of them's a Thordan. So the person says, ding, I win. Going to select the Thordan. The Thordan's going to go into the hand, and then because the card that went into the hand had an X burst, now that X burst effect, the Thordan effect, gets placed on the stack. Without getting into the fact that it's an effect on the stack and not an ability or summon, that's a whole different conversation. It's now on the stack, so unlike the normal process for X bursts, where they normally, when we take damage and we hit one, normally they resolve immediately and do not use the stack. In the case of effects like Lunafreya or the Fire Axe Star, it's going to put that X burst effect on the stack, and then it has to kind of go through the normal waiting process, the normal queue, as it were, before it resolves. So yeah, the broken down version there again is flip over 5 cards, there's Thordan, select Thordan, goes to your hand, trigger Thordan effect goes on the stack. If nothing else happens, Thordan effect resolves, we search for any card, we add that card to our hand. Okay, now how does that work with Sid, who has a trigger event? It says when your opponent uses an X burst, your opponent randomly discards one card. Now, if you were following what I said before with the breakdown of Lunafreya, I'm going to point out something here. which is this original question is predicated on saying, oh, I have no cards in my hand. Is Sid going to make me discard the card that I searched or not? And the thing you might have caught here is that you're not going to have no cards in your hand, because the thing is the Thordan is in your hand. The Thordan that triggered the X-Burst in the first place, it does go to your hand. So it's easy to kind of miss that in thinking about all of the other process of this. But I guess something to kind of point out that's important here is that you can't interrupt an effect that is resolving. You can't stop an effect in the middle of it resolving, no matter what happens. So all of Lunafreya's text here, other than the limit break 2, all of that is all one effect, and you have to do all those steps before anything else happens. Even when you take damage as part of an effect, even when you take damage and hit an X-Burst, the X-Burst still has to wait until the effect finishes resolving before you do it immediately. Which is also maybe not intuitive, because we always think of like, oh, doesn't use attack, we have to do it immediately. But like, no, you actually have to finish doing the rest of the effect. And so if we kind of think about when Sid triggers here, its trigger event is when your opponent uses an X-Burst. And that is in the part of Lunafreya's effect, when you get to it, says if the card added to your hand has an X-Burst, you may trigger its X-Burst effect, right? You don't have to. So at that point, they're saying, yes, I'm going to trigger its X-Burst effect, and then there's the, in parentheses, says this card is, or this effect is put on the stack. So at the point that you say, yes, I'm going to trigger its X-Burst effect, and then it gets put on the stack, that's when Sid triggers. But Sid's got to wait, and this auto ability has just triggered, but it doesn't go immediately on the stack, right? Auto abilities don't just go whoop and then jump right on the stack. They have to wait their turn. They have to wait until priority happens, until somebody gets priority, and then auto abilities that have triggered and are kind of floating out there waiting, then they get put on the stack. So what this means is that by the time Sid gets the opportunity to be put on the stack, the X-Burst effect, in this case the Thordan, is already on the stack. So it's on the stack down there, and then Sid gets placed on top of it. So although the bad news for the person asking the question is that they're not empty-handed because they have a Thordan in their hand, and they are going to lose that to the Sid, assuming that they would have been empty-handed otherwise. So they're going to lose that Thordan, and that's a bummer. But the good news is, because the Sid resolves before the X-Burst effect, in this case the Thordan, that means that the card that gets searched by the Thordan is not going to be in the hand when Sid is resolving. So it's not potentially going to be discarded by Sid. So kind of a win-lose there. You can safely search still. And for Lunafreya, I should point out, any other X-Burst that's going to add something to your hand, whether it's like a Kusith that's giving you something from the break zone, or whether it's a Reeve that's going to look at the top 3 cards and put one in your hand, in all those scenarios, the X-Burst is going to be on the stack below the Sid. So if you're worried about the Sid swiping away the thing that you're about to add to your hand, luckily the way that Lunafreya works, luckily for you at least, the way Lunafreya works, it's going to be put in your hand after the point at which Sid resolves, which is the opposite of how it would be if this was an X-Burst that was not going on the stack, by the way. If Sid was in, if you had no hand and Sid was in play and then the Thordan gets hit for damage, then you normally would go search that card immediately, put it in your hand, and then after that the auto ability from Sid that had triggered would go on the stack, and then it would resolve, and then it would make you discard that one card in your hand. So it's completely backwards due to the fact that Lunafreya's effect puts the X-Burst on the stack. So hopefully you followed all of that. But yeah, that I think I explained how the stack is built there to answer the question. That leads us to our final question for today. And our final question here is, when the power of Name Viking and Job Pirate becomes 8,000 by Ferris, can they still get increases in power, or does it always stay at 8,000? For instance, by another field ability like Maria. Does the answer stay the same in case of an auto ability like Cyan or an action ability like Nedging? So Ferris here she's got this nifty little field ability that says the power of the job pirate forwards and card name Viking forwards other than Ferris you control becomes 8,000. And then the question that this person is asking goes on to ask about all different ways that forwards can gain power and how that interacts with it. So I'll come back to that, but just to get to the crux of all of this, whenever we have an effect that uses the word becomes is a magic word. It's another one of these magic words where it has very specific rules, connotations behind what it does and how that works. When it says the power of something becomes something, what it is doing is it is overriding or replacing, or however you want to think of it, the printed power on the card. So if we have a Viking that's 2,000 power, like it's printed 2,000 power, Ferris comes into play and her effect says, that doesn't say 2,000 anymore. It says 8,000 now. So you treat it as if it has printed on the card 8,000. So just like any other card that has printed power, we use that printed power as a starting point. And then we take whatever other effects are happening and we apply that to the starting point. So the good news here for the person who's trying to play Ferris is that any other effects are still going to be applied. It's not like locking them into 8,000. So it's not like, okay, that Viking's 8,000 power and you had a Maria that would increase its power, but now it can't because its power just is constantly becoming 8,000. Now it's not how it works. It's just saying that the printed power of the card is now 8,000. It's quasi similar to that when we talk about the cost of cards, we always talk about the printed cost. So if something is talking about like, oh, choose a forward of cost 5 or more, we're talking about its printed cost, what the printed crystal is there. We're talking about that same idea, except that here we're actually having an effect that's changing that stat, as it were. It's changing the card as if it was physically printed different now. So that Viking now, it's like it has 8,000 prints in the bottom right corner. But what I love about this question is I love the just how thorough the question is, because it doesn't just ask about effects one way or the other. It's asking, wait, is it different if it's a field ability or if it's an auto ability or if it's an action ability? So again, I love the thoroughness of this. So because it's so thorough, I'm going to answer it just as thoroughly because I just appreciate that attention to detail. So let's just talk about every scenario here. So we have Ferris up there, and then we have Maria. And Maria, she's got a field ability that just says the forwards you control gain plus 1,000 power. So field ability that's out there, ongoing effect, increasing by 1,000 power. So if you had the Viking out there that was 2,000 power, and you had Maria on the field, and then Ferris enters the field, you play or cast Ferris in some form. She enters the field. The Viking's printed power becomes 8,000, and then because we have Maria out there, now that Viking's power is 9,000. So the Viking would have been 3,000 power before, because it would have been 2,000 plus 1,000. But now with Ferris there, we've changed the printed power to 8,000, and then we apply the Maria, it's 9,000 power. Then we have Cyan, who's got an auto ability. Cyan has an auto ability. It says when Cyan enters the field until the end of the turn, all the forwards you control gain plus 1,000 power and Brave. So if you already had the Ferris and the Viking on the field, so that Viking is 8,000 power, and then we play Cyan onto the field, he enters, the auto ability resolves, and everybody that you control gains plus 1,000 power. So now Ferris is 9,000 power, and the Viking is also 9,000 power, and they both have Brave. And then lastly, Nedging here has an action ability that says you dull it, and it says choose one forward of cost 3 or less. It gains plus 1,000 power till the end of the turn. So again, if we have Ferris and a 2,000 power Viking, assuming that Viking was cost 3 or less, then the Viking's currently 8,000 power because of Ferris, and then you use Nedging, you choose your Viking, and then when it resolves, it gains 1,000 power, which means that now it's 9,000 power. So in all those scenarios, field ability, action ability, auto ability, we're gonna apply them. Nothing about Ferris's ability is going to like interrupt or futz with very technical term, or futz with the other effects that are increasing or decreasing the forwards, the Viking's power. there. Now, they didn't ask about special abilities, but the answer would be the same. If you had a special ability that added to the Vikings' power or somehow altered the Vikings' power. So yeah, every type of ability. As I mentioned, I just appreciate the thoroughness of the question. So yeah, we've covered all the bases there. That's how Ferris works. That's how any effect works that says that a forward's power becomes something. All it means is that we've just changed the printed number on the bottom right, and you apply everything else exactly the same. So that was the last question for today. Those are 10 questions again. So if you were tracking yourself along there, I hope that you did well with your score out of 10. Before we wrap up, I do want to mention it wasn't an official announcement, so I didn't mention it at the beginning. But kind of really cool thing that happened this week too is that YoCisa, if you know them from Discord or Facebook too, I guess they're also on Facebook, but mostly on Discord. They announced that they have started up their new Discord server and test for people who are interested in judging, whether you're already judging or you want to get into judging or any of that stuff. It's an invite-only Discord server where you have to take this test to get into it. It's all unofficial, and it's not looking to bestow any officiality onto anybody. You're not going to get any sort of certifications or anything from it. But if you're just trying to get better at the rules, whether as a judge or otherwise, or just kind of understanding the judge side of things, that test is out there to be able to potentially get into the Discord server, where they have plans to do a whole bunch of things to help, especially with the floor rules side of things, the actual judging side of things, beyond just the rules and the interactions there. And so yeah, there's a pretty epic length article about it over on FFTCG And so yeah, if you're watching this, I suggest going and checking that out, reading the article. If you feel bold enough taking the test there, it's not, you don't get to take it as many times as you want, so just be warned that if you commit to doing it, there's limitations on how often you get to retake it. But it's great to see that server go live and things get started. A lot of people are taking the test, which is great. And so yeah, it's a good resource that's just starting up for judging stuff, and I highly suggest going and checking that out. Again, it's FFTCGChristerium.com. You can find the article there. It's also been shared around on Facebook and Discord and stuff. So anyway, that's my plug for somebody else. It's a not shameless plug, because it's not for me. Anyway, we've reached the end here. So thank you so much for watching this far, and for for watching the video. Like I said, nothing else other than just that. If you're looking to connect with me or just kind of keep up with the content here, then you're watching this on YouTube, so you can like this on YouTube and you can subscribe to me, which are both awesome things. I'm continuing to creep towards 200 subscribers, which is surreal, but getting there one by one. So if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. Join the other 191. They're also awesome people, just like you are. And then you can like the video, because that's also a cool thing to do. But yeah, I'm here at youtube.com/@JudgeJared. If you want to reach out to me on Facebook, then on Facebook, there's the page, which is facebook.com/JudgeJared. And you can see the stuff I have there, which includes pictures of all of the slides from these questions, and then the links to the answers to those, the time-stamped answers to those questions. So you can look up any of the old questions there, and also where I do my spoiler spreadsheet stuff and things. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, I am at JudgeJaredFFTCG, so you can find me there and ask me questions there if you want to. And then on Discord, my DMs are open over there, and my username is Judge Jared, so you can also reach out to me there. So if you have any questions or comments or feedback or something you'd love to see me cover, then you have 4 different spots that you can try to reach out to me. So yeah. Once again, thank you so much for watching and for just being here. I appreciate you. As always, I'm Judge Jared, and until next time, court is adjourned.